Very good day, dear friends. This session is dedicated to trends in the vocational education. And the key trend, as I believe, and this is echoed by many colleagues of mine, that marks the development of human capital and education-related sectors, and what distinguishes the 21st century from the 20th century is that we've been shifting from the product-centered to the human-centered approach. While the human-centered approach is something different from the client-centered. It's not about rendering a service or making a purchase or investing money. No, it's about the fact that education should be centered around the human being, an individual. It should not be a functional approach. Let me draw a line between this and the healthcare. Like in the public healthcare, they're also moving from the product-centered to the human-centered approach of treating a specific individual, a patient. Well, each patient may have his or her peculiarities with respect to their body, and definitely we must match the needs and priorities of our individuals and patients. So it's not about an abstract human being taking center stage, but a specific individual in a specific place and in specific circumstances with a specific background in education and other aspects. So this is something we can discuss here, and let's start with a general question. Today we have very interesting panelists, Deputy Minister of Science and Higher Education, as well as a head of and managing partner of Skyeng, and myself. I'm a rector of a major federal university. I will not talk platitudes, asking that shifting from product-centered to human-centered approach is important, because both of you nodded. But what is your vision? How it manifests itself? What specific steps we must make to have it come true? Let's start with the Deputy Minister who used to be a rector in the past. Yes, thank you for reminding and recalling that. It is not a novelty in education. From a historical perspective, the choice of a tutor, professor, or curriculum has always been the domain of a specific student and a specific individual. And the epoch of industrialization gave rise to new standards of education, the mass education, the standardized curricula, the limited choice, and that is now superseded by a new epoch. So the trend is in existence. I agree with that, but for our further discussion, for that sake, I would point out several junctures. First of all, we have the first junction whether education is like merely training or preparing for future profession, but is it something greater, something more? It must be related to upbringing and crafting a personality. So the professional core and the personal choice must be somehow combined. And the second bifurcation is the technological one. Like each student will have an opportunity to change and choose his or her own trajectory in learning, and we must ask ourselves whether the new digital and technological solutions allow to dispatch the trajectory of each and every student effectively. And the third point we must discuss is psychological. An customized trajectory presupposes that an individual is capable of making this choice and having a sound judgment and good self-perception. So these are the three vectors that boil down to the customized trajectory, personalized education process, and the expectations of the society from the education process. Aleksandr, same question to you. Well, currently we are faced off with the massive desire to customize, which is so for the first time, and the Maslow pyramid of needs is definitely quite tried, but still it remains relevant. And our parents were the first generation that experienced no food shortages for the first time in our history, in the history of the humankind. And now we have moved to a new stage of making individual choices, of customization, and the digitalization with algorithms provide for this choice, like having a playlist in an online music app. And same refers to our vocational and professional fulfillment. What is needed is fulfillment now. And because of the algorithms, we have been able to see that the apps may prompt us this or that way forward, like a car navigator would tell us where to go. So they may come in handy, they may be of help, or like Yandex gives a specific customized answer to each of us, which is the typical model service for Yandex, but for us it is at the end of the day a customized response. But the main problem I think that we face is that all kinds of education, like the higher school education and private and public, can only cater to the motivated learners. For example, the learners that were not dissuaded to learn and study by their parents or someone else. But these motivated learners count for several percent only, and the remaining 90 to 95% of adults have been neglecting their inherent desire to learn and study. But what we need is to motivate them again. Thank you. Aleksandr has now touched upon a very complicated and eternal topic for all times. Like I have always been reminding that teaching someone is a secondary objective, but learning, which is an active process, is something much more relevant. You know the proverb, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. If an individual is reluctant to learn, it would be very hard to motivate him or her. So it should be a two-way street. On the one hand, there are some technologies and solutions that should be harnessed and employed by the educational establishments. And the demand side also should be relevant, And the programs and curricula for postgraduate studies and for students and for school children should be different. Well, passing the buck and shunning responsibility, shirking responsibility onto the learners, saying that they're reluctant is not the right thing to do. Sometimes many people say that it is too hard to study in this country, but or probably it is too easy, Coming back to that horse metaphor, well, the horse should work hard to have a desire to drink, to be thirsty, to drink when it's led to the water. So, but now coming back to our client-centered approach, what matters most, the customization of the educational trajectories, or is it something else? As Dmitry has truly and rightly said, that the pre-higher school epoch in the medieval colleges, they had just strolls with their professors and discussed individual learning plans. But now how can the massive education, large-scale education become customized? Well, going digital is not a silver bullet. Well, Aleksandr, yes, I agree with you. Well, if we have the shamble, if we digitalize the shamble, it's still going to be shambolic, but digitally. So the digital solutions are only a tool. We have the role models, actually, and if we narrow it down to the vocational education and further down to the IT sector training. And now the pandemic has changed it all. Like 5 years ago, you can learn get trained to become an IT professional. Your salary afterwards would go considerably up. You'll get the take-home pay of yours will be several times more, but you had to migrate to a big city, and your costs would also spiral. But now you can take a course and receive much more after a short period of time, which means that all across the country, in all the towns, cities and settlements, we will see the role models, new role models. These are people who have become better off thanks to their education. They take courses and they start earning more, and their livelihoods go up and their life quality is improved. And the more examples of that kind, the more instances we have, the more motivation there would be. And at the same time, we should be able to resolve the problems of specific individuals. They must have their own trajectory. First of all, we should have the measurable parameters, like the pain. We want to increase the income of a person that can be measured. Unfortunately, we cannot take the best minds of the humankind and ask them to improve things and come up with a silver bullet. So we should be always specific. Let's take, for example, the income difference before and after, and the education time span, and the percentage of completion. So this will help us understand what is the human-centered approach in education. Okay, Dmitry, tell us now the following thing. One of the parameters says that the ministry should employ graduates that work as per their major profession. But as a matter of fact, new professions and new vocations appear. Like if you enter university, in 5 years there may appear new professions that were in existence before. It's not about making a lawyer work as a doctor, no. But in universities and vocational schools, we should cater to the needs of the real economy, but doesn't that contrary to the customization, like my own needs and I want this and that? This customization is important as it kind of can help each individual find his or her bearings with respect to the career destination and trajectory. But on the other hand, we have the overarching goals of this nation, of this country. So is there a match between these, or can they be combined? These are contrary things. Are these poles apart? Or can we align them? Well, I think that this is the core question of our today's session and panel, because the education market is dual in nature. On the one hand, the education establishments come up with a curriculum or a program that the future prospective students opt for. But on the other hand, the employers have their own requirements, so we will never see the 100% match between your diploma, your major, and your actual job afterwards. Like 65% of graduates work as per their majors, as per their specialization, because it took them 3 to 5 years to get trained, and labor market may have changed over that time span, and the pace of change is accelerating, and hence the education system should also be subject to transformation and capable of transformation. And the question is how to combine the projecting the future needs, the current needs, and the interests of the students and future students, how to match all these. And definitely the costs should also be proper, reasonable. Like if a student pays for his or her education, it's up to them, and it's only confined by their monetary and purchasing power. But if it's covered by the state, by the government, so in this case we should look for the frameworks that would help combine the stable core that would work as per their diploma, specialization, but at the same time provide for some room for choice. The 2+2 concept has been established of late and is propagating, or for example, the major and minor concept for an individual with two, like mathematics and dance or art, and definitely, yes, there may be two different professions that one and the same individual may take, two courses. And another example to cite is an opportunity to receive additional specializations of professions alongside learning a major. Like if a year ago a university was confined by professional standards, now it is lifted and we are saying that you can combine different standards.
So the role of the university itself is of the utmost importance in shaping such a flexible program, such a flexible curriculum, which gives you certain boundaries within which you can make a choice. Another issue, how you teach the students to make the choice, how to motivate them. But they also need to learn how to take responsibility for their choices. But from education, we are venturing into a more difficult complex concept. There need to be some competences, such as assuming the responsibility for your choices. Because, the school is shaped following the principle of an education pump, as it were. And there is this disruption between school and university, and we need to fill in this gap. So what can you add? I would like to pick up where my colleague has left. From the scientific point of view, why does it take so long to modify the education system? Not because no one wants to do anything, but it's just, the context is like that. And the statistics is like that. If you need to find, a panacea, it takes decades and decades because you need to run the experiments. And human life is too short. And it's very important that right now we learn these short cycles. We establish several cycles, and you can inculcate some professional skills. And of course, it won't give you a new profession, but it means that through these short cycles, we can run several experiments throughout one single year. We can test different hypotheses, and in a year, in 18 months, we can show that we've managed to find some solutions. So this is the mixture we are aiming for. A mixture of soft skills, and we can show what works and what won't work and what can be replicated by tertiary education institutions. So very quickly we can test different types, different hypotheses. Private companies are very good at finding what the market requires at this particular point of time through running short experiments. Yes, we do not always have the methodology nor the scientific foundation, but if we work together with the universities, we will be able to come up with a product. And then we can, meld it with school and see what we need to get the best outcome possible. Thank you. Well, we've got two representatives here. One represents the private sector education and the other the public sector education. What we're discussing today is a very interesting situation. So how much space do we have for competition? Competition is something we need. That part, at least, is clear. But how is this competition to be shaped? What is your advantage? Well, our competitive advantage is speed. Speed of what? Of launching a product into the market, of everything. Launching the product, getting the feedback, the understanding of what needs to be done, what can be done, where the supply is, where the demand is. And of course, we have the advantage of upscaling. This is yet another manifestation of our speed. We know, and we know whom to work with. And yes, as I can say, we can work with those who is somewhat disappointed in education as a way of improving their own life. So I think that we help people who are not into vocational education, but who would probably go into tertiary education if we propel them somewhat upwards, give them a better income, their level of life is gonna rise. They will see that education has helped them somewhat to climb the social ladder, and once that's done, they will understand that they need a higher education. So we're not seeking to replace tertiary education institutions. We are simply serving as kind of an intermediate stage between school, secondary school, and tertiary education. We're not trying to replace either the universities or the vocational schools. Well, let me make it even more clear. As far as I understand, if you want to raise your income from 20,000 to 50,000, then this is where you go, to Mr. Laryanovskiy. And if you need to raise your income to 500,000, then you need to turn to tertiary education. Well, the thing is, tertiary education landscape is as diverse, and it's, we can see so many issues, so many ways that the competition is there. The scale of the system is very big. So far, it's incompatible with the scale of landscape shaped by private educational institutions. And of course, private organizations are having greater latitude in experimenting, and that's why it's where new innovations and solutions can come from. And the government can act as a partner afterwards, helping to fund it and to scale it up. So private institutions provide a platform for running experiments, and then it can be replicated. And this is how it works. And this interpenetration, it has many concrete examples in practice. But why do big universities seem to be unable to respond swiftly? Is there too much inertia? Are they less prone to competition? Like, it's a big vessel and it's sailing forth, and it's very hard to turn it. Well, I can ask the same question of you, because you are the rector of a very big, stable institution. Another example can be used as an analogy. Let's take the production of jeans. Jeans are always produced, and jeans are always in fashion and vogue. Yes, you change and tweak little details, but still, this is a big niche, kind of a rut you are moving in, and it's very hard to break the rut. Any institutional changes in tertiary education take a whale of time. The cycles are very long. So how do we use this experience of fast response? How do we learn to readjust quickly? This is an important objective even for the leading institutions, universities. Yes, you could probably give us this function of trial and error, and you can take ready-made solution from us, and we'll come up with new ones. Yes, I agree. I think it's of huge import in all of this that we can improve the standard of life of not hundreds of thousands of people, but of millions of people. If we look at this group of people, well, let's take 5 million people and do something good for them. In university in particular, to become even swifter. We, took tasers from everywhere to shake us up into form. So a person comes to us and he doesn't pay anything. And after education, we tell him, if after getting our education, you get more than 50,000, yes, then our job is done, and we'll take some percentage of your income for several years or months to get the payment. If it's 49%, it's 49,000, not 50,000, then we fail and we don't take a dime. So we always trying to keep us in shape. We are running this blade. So we understand that we live by the income of our graduates. If it were the case with the universities, then the universities would respond swiftly too. But, well, it's just, impractical. It's impossible to imagine. But we are willing to do that. Well, to an extent, I can agree with that. This is the specificity of this venture approach, which is less characteristic of universities funded from the budget, but it's more specific, peculiar to private organizations. But still, universities are also a platform for experiments. And these two things are components of one single system. So private institutions are still more adaptive, they are less prone to inertia, and universities are more rigid. And how do we combine that? We believe that is the question on our agenda right now. And we have to engage everyone there. Yes, that's true, but I'm afraid we are shifting from the human-centered approach to competition, to the objectives and the education market. But where does this human person come in? So, do we teach what we know how to teach, or do we teach what we know the person needs, what the person wants? And does the person even know what they want? Even before I came into the education field, I always faced this problem. You know, a young person tells me, I don't want to learn that because I won't need that. And I'm asking, how do you know that you won't need that? So how do you combine this human-centered approach with a fundamental approach? How do you combine all of this? Yes, the person should be willing to assume responsibility for their choices, but the university also needs to be able to tell them that this is important, this is something you're going to need. And that is setting aside the fact that universities seek to train your brain. That is what university education is about, not just, transferring knowledge. You're not learning poems by heart, nor are you simply studying ancient languages, the Great Four. This is yet another example of a multi-purpose bachelor's degree. But you still train your brain, basically. That is essentially what universities are about. So, once again, how do we combine that? It's a very complex matter. Dialectic, even. Well, you cited this metaphor that university is a horse that can take you to the stream, that it cannot make you drink. I'm not saying that you need to make pickles out of cucumbers. You have to put the person into this marinated sauce. So, university is about creating an environment that will spur you on. You cannot make a person accept the education. You have to create conditions for the person to be able to do that. This has to be a flexible environment. And of course, the students need to have a choice. The electives, additional qualifications, the trajectory of your education, the theme for your thesis, this environment has to be wider than traditionally was offered to the students. We need to have this hardcore, this solution in which you are placed. And you also need to have these turning points that allow you to make a choice. And this will, help us strike a balance between the interests of the government and the interests of the student that makes the choice. From the point of view of business, it's as follows. We understand how and what we need, but we do not understand exactly how to go about that. We need to understand how to take these components together and how to make that fit for the person in question. This has to be dynamic, and we need to run the experiments and test all of our best hypotheses. So far, we see that we want to venture into this field, and so far The scale is very small. We cannot help millions of people, but that is our objective. So we'll find these small elements. We will see that we are good at this, we're good at that, and then we will churn the milk, turning it into sour cream that'll be more solid ground for us to stand on. On behalf of the regulator, I can tell you that over the last 24 months, we've done a lot to free the universities up. We changed the curricula, the syllabi, the standards have been readjusted, and we've decoupled the educational standard from the professional standard, thereby creating a possibility for flexible trajectories. This is a new, more flexible framework for this new age education. Unfortunately, we have to conclude. Time has flown by. In conclusion, I would like to say that our discussion has turned out to be quite optimistic and also realistic. I see many things over many years, some trends emerging in tertiary education. Over the last 1.5 decades, we've seen tectonic shifts in the mindset, in the perception of education. It's not a service anymore, it's more like an investment. And this is what we see, especially among our students. This happens in masters, not in bachelor degree, but still it's seeping into the bachelor degree as well. So in the past, a student came to us expecting us to give them a certificate of education, especially if that was a tuition-based program. And some felt that it was too easy to study. But right now it's different. They see that it is an investment, and it's obvious, especially at RANEPA. And our students treat education like that. And this is a source of encouragement. Thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you. Thank you for this discussion.